The Habs get a much-needed win against the Anaheim Ducks, and the top line of Suzuki, Caulfield, and Slafkovsky continues to dominate. We'll talk about this and more on Hockey Inside Out. Hello and welcome to another episode of Hockey Inside Out. I'm your host, Jessica Rusnak. Joining me on the panel this week, we've got Stu Cowan from the Montreal Gazette. We have former NHLer, Stanley Cup champ, and former assistant coach with the Montreal Canadiens, Rick Green. And we have Andrew Berkshire back with us, independent hockey analyst. Good morning, gentlemen. So the Montreal Canadiens were able to rebound after those pair of losses over the weekend. They got a 5-0 win against the Anaheim Ducks Tuesday night. Do you think at this point in the season, the players on the Canadiens think there is a chance that they could make the playoffs somehow? Rick, what do you think is the mindset in the locker room right now?
Well, you wouldn't like to think as a coach that any of those guys are thinking that we're not going to find a way to win some hockey games. Whether or not they're good enough to get in the playoffs is really a long shot. If you look at the teams ahead of them, their scheduling, a lot of teams are going to be fighting tooth and nail for every point. That's going to really, really mean something for them. Canadiens, I'm not sure. It's not a very comfortable situation to be in. And again, when we see that game against St. Louis, we thought, oh boy, this is it. They kind of packed it. But Martin St. Louis, I think the last thing he wants to have happen is see the guys kind of fold their tent and pack it. He wants them to continue to show some pride and some effort, and he's going to do his best to get the guys to follow that route. But it is challenging when the road ahead of you is quite long and they have big challenges. But listen, they're professionals. They're supposed to be performing each and every night, and I'm quite sure that the management is hoping that they're going to see that.
Well, the biggest fear for any coach, I think, and Rick, you've been a coach, you would know, is players giving up, right? And the last thing you want is players to give up. And the Canadiens, this one thing about this Canadiens team since Marty St. Louis took over is they don't give up, right? They compete hard. That's why they haven't had they're not good enough to have had a long winning streak this season, but they also haven't had a long losing streak, and that says a lot about their compete level. And the game against Anaheim, we saw a team that doesn't compete. I mean, I haven't seen a worse performance than that at the Bell Center that I can remember. That was a team just going through the motions. It sort of reminded me of the final days of Dominic Ducharme coaching the Canadiens, but it was even worse. Like, they didn't, until the last couple of minutes when they decided they were going to fight, it's like they didn't even really care. I mean, the Canadiens, before the game against Anaheim, their odds of making the playoffs were 0.1%. According to sportsclubstats.com. So that old Jim Carrey, Dumb and Dumber. So you're saying there's a chance, right? And before the game, I spoke with some of the players and I asked them about it. And I asked, Caden Gooley's a really smart guy and he's a young guy. Just a quote he gave me, he says, we know that we're a young team and we know that people want to say rebuild, but we want to make the playoffs and we think that we can do that. With the guys we have in here, we believe that we can do that. When we lost Monahan, I'm sure people would have asked what that means for us. The answer hasn't changed. We still have the same goal, the same mindset, still pushing for that playoff spot. So they realize, they're smart guys. They realize, they look at the standings and they realize that they're not going to make the playoffs. Before the season started, none of us, I don't think, expected them to make the playoffs. But it says a lot about the team that the players are still saying that, they want to make the playoffs. They're still competing. They're still playing hard. And they played really well against Anaheim, a bad team, but those are the teams you need to beat if you want to have any chance of making the playoffs. So their odds might have gone to 0.2% with that win, maybe. But again, just the fact that they compete as hard as they do, I think, says a lot about the way the Canadiens are going about this rebuild and how they still want to play for Marty St. Louis.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Stu, about the Ducharme thing, because I was going to go the exact place. I was thinking of February, right before he got fired, and I went and looked it up, and there was a string of games. I believe they lost 7-1 to New Jersey, who at that time was not the New Jersey Devils that we see now, right? Jack Hughes was a shade of what he has become. And then they got rocked, I believe, 8-4 by the Jets. And I think that was it for Don Ducharme.
Montembeault got run over in that game against the Devils, if I remember right, too.
Yes.
Right.
The famous one where Petrie just kind of skated by, right? Mm-hmm. And you see what a team that doesn't have it, isn't competing, looks like, and that is what the Ducks looked like against the Canadiens. But the Canadiens, what they've been able to do here, I think, threading that needle of being bad enough to get good picks while maintaining a level of competitiveness for their young players, it seems like there's still positivity in that room. I can't think of another time where a rebuilding team had that. And it's really interesting to me. Like, I find them very interesting to watch because there are games against Anaheim, sure, bad team, they ran over them, to be expected, I guess. But there are also games where the Canadiens play up to teams like Boston, up to teams like LA, up to teams that are actually competing for a Stanley Cup this season. And I think that those are the games where I really look at this group and say, like, there's something special in that core that can be more, right? And we've seen that top line click, and now they're looking like they have the potential to be 3 guys who could be point per game at their absolute peak on that top line. Not everyone on the team obviously is going to be part of the rebuild forever. There's a very small group that will be part of the team when they're actually good, but there's a lot of positivity around this club, and I think that's really good for the fans, and I think fans notice that. That's why it's really important to win some of these games at the Bell Center. The Bell Center was absolutely rocking against the Ducks. When Gignac scored his first career goal, they rained down applause for like 4 or 5 minutes after. I think when the Canadiens are good, they absolutely have to be an excellent home team, because that like borderline worship from the Bell Center energizes the whole team and makes them more capable of picking themselves up in big moments as well.
Yeah, well, they have struggled at home. They're 11, 14, and 3 at home. But I think not only the Canadiens feed off the Bell Center, the visiting teams feed off the Bell Center. And I think that's one of the reasons they struggle. Teams, especially come in here once a year, the Anaheim Ducks being the exception, get fired up to come and play at the Bell Center, especially if it's a Saturday night and it's a hockey night in Canada game. But I mean, you were going back to Ducharme, and you remember after his last game, Josh Anderson spoke about how it wasn't fun coming to the rink anymore. This Canadiens team has fun. They have fun coming to the rink. And you mentioned the Gignac goal there, Andrew. You know, what a story this kid is. 26 years old. He scores his first NHL goal. 3 years ago, he was playing in the East Coast Hockey League. And not just his reaction, like his smile was priceless, but the reaction of his teammates. They were like happier than him. And that says a lot about sort of the brotherhood that the Canadiens are building in this locker room with so many young guys, so many guys 24 and under. They know that number one line, the oldest guy is Suzuki at 24. On the power play, that number one power play, the only guy who's older than 24 is Mike Matheson, who plays like he's 23 or 24 and skates like he's 23 or 24. So Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton said right from the beginning, and Marty St. Louis, they want like everyday guys in the locker room. And they built a really, like, covering the team, there's no jerks on this team. Like, when you're dealing, previous years, you'd have some guys you didn't want to talk to or guys that could be jerks. They're a good group of guys in this locker room right now. And I think, while it's not necessarily showing in the results yet, it's a big part of this rebuild is that they want to have a bond with these guys. They want to have a young group of guys that get together, get along well on the ice, fight for each other on the ice. We saw that at the end of the Anaheim game. It's a really good group they have. Whether they're going to succeed in this rebuild, we'll see. I mean, rebuilds aren't easy. But for year 2 of a rebuild, there's a lot of signs that make it look hopeful for the future going ahead.
And I think if you put playoffs aside, just trying to attract free agents, that they're looking at this team and saying, you know what, they're in the rebuild, they're not in the playoff picture yet, but maybe in a few years, and I kind of want to be a part of this. Whereas sometimes when teams are struggling, free agents look at them and say, yeah, right, I don't want to touch this team with a 10-foot pole. So I think that's also the difference, that around the league, some players are noticing that this team has a good attitude, is going in the right direction, and that maybe they want to jump on and be part of this. It's
a great point, Jess. And also it's the way management treats people. The players, the alumni also, Rick, you know about that. The way that Kent Hughes, Sean Monahan wanted to come back here and play again this season. You go back to the days of Mark Bergevin, if you want loyalty, get a dog. The way it went with Radulov, the way it went with Pacioretty, the way it went with Markov. Go down the list. Markov not playing 1,000 games for the Canadiens is shameful that didn't happen. But it's a different, this management team treats the players with respect, and they treat them with respect whether they're here or whether they're on their way out. Jeff Petrie, you mentioned also, Andrew, when he wanted to be traded, and Kent Hughes made an amazing trade getting Mike Matheson, and then when he acquired him back, he called Petrie and said, don't worry, you're not going to play here, we're going to trade you again, and then he did. And that goes around the league. Sean Monahan is one of the most respected players in the NHL, and he's in Winnipeg now, and guys are going to ask him, what's it like in Montreal? He's going to have nothing but positive things to say.
And I think chemistry and and good character people, as you touched on, Stu, is really, really important. And this is what they're striving to do. And they have a lot of guys that really care for each other, and ones that are a little bit out of character, showing that they do care for each other. When they drop the gloves, Kovacevic is not his style of play, but he's like upset and sticking his nose in there for his teammates. And I think that speaks well for them as a group, that they have the kind of people that really care for each other, which is not easy to do in today's game. But they're trying to surround and put as many winners in the room that really care and want to be part of the organization, and will respond in a way that they're going to try and perform and do their very best and be proud.
I joked on Twitter calling Kovacevic Jonathan Knuckles Kovacevic. I don't know whether our buddy Chris Dunn will like that or not. There's only one real Knuckles. But for Kovacevic, a guy who played university hockey, not a guy you'd be expecting to drop the gloves. And the same with Jaden Struble also. And as I said, it was just bizarre how Anaheim had no interest in that game, it seemed, until the end. And then they wanted to fight. And the Canadiens said, okay. So they beat him on the ice and they beat him in the alley.
Rick, tell me if I'm full of it here, but when you're on a team that's losing all the time, to me, it seems like there would be more opportunity for conflict between players as opposed to when you're winning and everything's kind of going well. So to have, as Stu said, no jerks on the team right now when it's very clearly not a winning environment, that seems like a bit of a big accomplishment.
And one of the bright spots right now with the Canadiens is, of course, that top line with Suzuki, Caulfield, Slavkovsky. And with Suzuki, especially after the game against Anaheim, he extended his point streak to a career high of 8 games. He's got 13 points over that span. What do you think is working well with those 3 players, and in particular with the captain that's made him so hot right now? Stu, why don't you lead us off?
Well, I think Nick Suzuki plays his game. He's a consistent player. He's a 200-foot performer. And I think his points going up, it has a lot to do with Juraj Slavkovsky playing so much better and gaining so much confidence and starting to shoot the puck. Not always looking to pass it. So Nick Suzuki's Nick Suzuki, and he plays his game. He's a solid NHL player. And, we're wondering about if he's going to be a point-per-game player. He's right close there now. He's got 50 points in 53 games, like it is. And if he continues like this and that line continues like that, by the end of the season, he's going to have more than 82 points. I think it's just a case of the comfort level with these 3 guys together. They seem to like each other on the ice. They like each other off the ice. They're having fun playing together, and they're figuring it out. And nobody's figuring out more than, the improvement in Juraj Slavkovsky over the last month is really, really remarkable. And I wrote a column earlier in the season, though, this kid shouldn't be in the NHL. He's out of his place. He should go back to the AHL. At that time, it looked like he should. Like, he didn't look like he belonged here. But kudos to Marty St. Louis and the coaching staff for sticking with it and saying, no, we're keeping him here. This is the best place for him to develop. And they're showing now that they were right. Like, he's turning into every game looking more and more like a really good NHL player. And we're seeing now why the Canadiens decided to take him with the number 1 overall pick. He's the thing I really like about Slavkovsky, he doesn't seem to let bad games get him down. Like, he's very mature for a 19-year-old kid. And I think that plays a big role in the way he's been able to develop with him. The pressure in Montreal on any player is huge. The pressure on a number 1 overall pick is incredibly huge. He's handled it all really well, and he's a really nice kid. He's a good kid to be around. I'm really happy to see him doing as well as he's doing right now, and I think he's just going to keep improving as the season goes on.
And I don't think there's any question that what we were going to get out of Nick Suzuki from the get-go. I think the quality of him as a person and player was nothing but positive. Huge bonus to see Slavkovsky step in there and do what he's doing to complement his other line mates. And it's very seldom it's a one-man show if you look around the league. There's some guys that obviously make you go, wow, but then there's other that you have combination that seem to feed off each other and make great things happen when they're on the ice. And what we're seeing right now with those 3 is nothing but entertaining and really, really nice to see that things are starting to fall in place for Slavkovsky. Suzuki, I think, is just is a continual game player that gets results. We're seeing that happen, and it's going to continue that way. And it's really nice to see this type of stuff happening. Now we just need to get a little bit more from the other guys so that it doesn't become always the same guys each and every night. But we have to take the positive with the progression of Slafkovsky from where he was to where he is today, and give him full marks for responding and doing what he's doing, which is just nothing but great things that's helping out his other line mates.
I remember the day before the draft asking Slafkovsky why the Canadiens should draft him number one. And he said, basically, because I can play with Cole Caulfield and Nick Suzuki. And we're seeing that now. And, as I said, Suzuki's the oldest guy at 24 for Canadiens. And this could be a number one line for like 7-8 years. And look how good they are now. How good might they be 5-6 years from now? And when was the last time the Canadiens had a number one line like that? I mean, you got to go back to like Lemaire, Lafleur, and Shutt. I'm not saying these guys are going to be 3 Hall of Fame players. Maybe they will be, but I mean, Canadiens fans have not had a line like this, and I can't even remember. Like it's back in the days when we all had hair, I think, guys.
I mean, at least a line that can do it at even strength and the power play, right? Yeah, I think what I like most about those 3 players in the top line is not even the point production, right? Like that, we could all see that was going to figure itself out a few weeks ago, where the play had improved so drastically, right? I think Suzuki, Caulfield, and Slafkovsky, what they've impressed me with this season is their attention to details and their personal growth, adding things to their game. Nick Suzuki, when he came into the league, didn't shoot a lot, still doesn't shoot a ton, but every year it seems like he finds more and more ways to score. He finds himself in situations where he's able to add to his toolkit. And Juraj Slafkovsky this year started the year, looked good with Doc, and then with Anderson and Newhook, not so good. Once he was given an opportunity, all of a sudden he started to figure things out defensively, and we went from, like being frustrated with him being outmuscled on board battles to now he'll go in against 2 guys and win relatively easily, or he'll get knocked off the puck and he'll still end up with the puck because he's just bigger and realizes that he is bigger, has the reach, and he can manage to get hit and maintain puck possession or get it right back. It's little things like that add up more and more opportunities for them to show their skills. And that's why I'm all in on this line being big for the future. And I know that a lot of folks who follow the Canadiens really want them to land that superstar player. And hey, everybody wants that in this market, whether you're a fan or whether you're media, because it's way more fun to cover. Right? If you have Connor Bedard in a Habs jersey, everybody is happy in this market. But even if they don't, I think the model that they're looking at right now, and it might hurt to hear it a little bit, is Boston. I think they want eventually Doc to center a line that feels like the Krejci line in Boston, where for that peak years in the Bruins organization, you wouldn't have people who knew whether it was the Bergeron line or the Krejci line. It was the number one line, right? I think that's what they want to build. It's a tough thing to do because I think, you hear these rumors about Trevor Zegras. Maybe they want to do it with 3 lines and have 3 scoring lines. I would personally love that. It'd be a great challenge to the NHL status quo to try to build 3 full scoring lines and not have any superstars. I think it could work really efficiently, but it's tough to do that. You got to get a lot of really good players to build 3 first line caliber lines on a team and manage the cap situation. But they've got 1 line that's checked off, and that's a really good thing.
But Boston's a really good comparison, Andrew. I mean, Kent Hughes has a close connection to the Bruins, right? I mean, he lives in the Boston area. He was Bergeron's agent. From
Gorton, too.
And the Bruins, I mean, they lose Krejci, they lose Bergeron. They just keep rolling along. Doesn't matter. And that's what the Canes have said. They want to build a team that's not just going to be good 1 or 2 years. They want a team that's going to be not just make the playoffs every year, but have a chance to win the Stanley Cup every year. And that's what the Bruins are, right? And guys come, guys go. It doesn't matter. And that says a lot about the culture the Bruins have built in that locker room. You come in there and this is the way we do things. And this is how we play. And this is and if you don't do it, you're not going to stay here. And I think that's exactly the model the Canadiens have in this rebuild that they're trying to put together.
Moving on to rapid fire, I want to get your thoughts on Josh Anderson. He's been a player who's been struggling all season long. What do you think it is that Josh Anderson is just not looking like the player that we've seen him in the past? Andrew, what is your thoughts?
I have a theory on Josh Anderson, but obviously I'm not talking to him, so I don't know. We saw last year, Anderson diversified his game quite a bit. He still has major holes in his game, but last year he was taking shifts on the penalty kill. He was using his speed effectively. Once in a while, he'd throw a nice pass out there, and I know he got an assist on Jake Evans' goal against the Ducks, but it has been tough sledding for him. And I think that goalless drought at the beginning of the year, when he actually was playing well, really messed with his head. And he went back to the old habits that he used to have. And he happened to score while playing that way, and scored a couple of times, and has now just found himself back in the time of bad habits where he's a defensive black hole and he's not really generating that much offense either. And because he scored a couple goals that way, he's stuck, right? So he needs to get himself committed to playing the way he did last year and at the beginning of this year, even if the success in terms of goal scoring wasn't there at the beginning of the year. And I can't imagine how hard it is as a pro athlete to get yourself that way in the middle of a season, to change your habits. But it's not working. He looks terrible out there. He's, as we talked about before, he's not getting the breakaways. He's not getting those chances. He's not putting his shoulder down and barreling through guys. And if he's not doing the things that only he on this team can do, he doesn't have a spot. I don't think. Like, there's nowhere that he fits if he's not doing Josh Anderson typical things, and he's just not.
Well, I mean, I just look back at his slump that he had, and it was like going, "Oh, what's going to happen with this guy? He can't score in the ocean." I remember seeing Martin St. Louis after one of the games. I forget which one it was, maybe Florida, and said that okay, that's it. He's going to start to find a way to score, and then he did get on a little bit of a roll there, and was finding the net, and was playing and doing some good things that were, that were nice to see. And then next thing you know, he's fallen back and he's forgotten the type of things that he did previously that gave him success. And it's a real big question mark on, as far as, how is this guy going to find a way to be consistently, playing well to contribute to the way he should be contributing. And that's not happening. And I think he's really rattled. You can talk about confidence level. I just am really concerned about his overall, decision making, and just finding ways to get his better game out there. And he can't find it once again. And this is troubling when you have a guy like that you're hoping that better things are going to come, and they're not happening right now.
Yeah, I've been a big defender of Josh Anderson in the past, as anybody who watches the show regularly would know. And I kept saying, if they were to trade him, the next day they'd be looking for the next Josh Anderson. But this season, he's a shadow of the player we saw when the Canadiens went to the Stanley Cup final. You don't notice him most nights. I mean, against Anaheim, a team that wasn't even really trying, he had one shot on goal. And you don't see him finishing checks the way he was. I thought he'd still finish the season with 20 goals after that slump, and then he started scoring a bit. He's got one goal now in the last 15 games. I mean, he's not going to get 20 goals. He got 7 now. And I know he missed a couple of games. He was hurt. I mean, I wonder if maybe he's playing hurt. He's not even getting breakaways now. I mean, he used to get seemed like a breakaway every game. He'd miss most of them, but he was able to get free and get those breakaways. So it's a real troubling spot right now. When you look at Anderson, 3 more years with $5.5 million on his contract, and Brendan Gallagher 3 more years with $6.5 million. That's a lot of money for 2 guys that just aren't getting it done anymore, and it's going to be a real problem for Kent Hughes to handle moving forward, of what he does with these 2 guys. And there's still 29 games left, and Anderson, there's time for him to turn it around. But I'm wondering now if he will or if he can. It's very bizarre. Like I said, I've been a big defender of him, but watching him now, you hardly notice him when he's on the ice. And for a guy that big who can skate that fast, that's a really bad thing.
And in a game that was so physical, to see Anderson just be invisible was very shocking.
Yeah. And I said the Ducks weren't even really trying. That was a game, if you wanted to put your head down and bear down, and what we saw with the Canadiens' number 1 line, you could have had a really good night. And Josh Anderson had 1 shot on goal.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, you fairness, you have to judge a guy like that on, opportunities to score or chances, and you don't even hear his name.
Yeah, I feel like that he's been given kind of the opportunity to find his game, and then it just kind of seems like he hasn't been able to find it, and now it's time to kind of figure out why that is the case with him. But moving on to our next question in rapid fire, do you think that Joshua Waugh will spend the rest of the season with the Montreal Canadiens? Rick, what's your thoughts on him?
Well, that's kind of that's a good question. I mean, uh, let's look in the crystal ball here. But the bottom line out of all this, there's a kid with potential to be a good player, and how they handle him is critical as far as giving him the NHL opportunity versus letting him fine tune and continuing success in the American League. But I think obviously injuries have been a big factor in allowing him to come up, and he needs to experience the NHL. As far as length or the amount of time that you want to give him, that's the big question mark. And of course, as we get down to the trading deadline, it becomes a little more restricting as far as players in, players out. But he has the potential. He needs some time, and I'm not sure whether he's going to, be up with the team other than filling a void from injuries for a long term.
Yeah, when they sent him down, I didn't think we'd see him again. I thought they would leave him in Laval. I think they would think that was probably the best for his development. He'd help Laval, hopefully for the Rocket, get in the playoffs and then enjoy that playoff experience. But I think everything that Jeff Gorton and Kent Hughes are doing is just what's the best for this player's development. We spoke about Yuri Slafkovsky before. They believe the best for his development was to keep him in the NHL. And with Joshua Waugh, I think if they think it's going to be better for his development to stay with the Canadiens and play these last 29 games here and get that experience, that's what they'll do. If they think it's better for him to go down and get the playoff experience in Laval, that's what they'll do. I think it's March 5th is the deadline. They'd have to send guys down if they're going to be eligible for the playoffs. So maybe at that point, the Canadiens look and see, are the Rocket going to be in the playoffs? Do we think they're going to be there? And I think around that time, they'll make the decision. But there's advantages to both, right? There's advantages to sending him down to Laval and playing him more minutes and maybe going on a playoff run. And there's other advantages to having him play in the NHL and gain some confidence and play when there's not a whole lot of pressure. I mean, they're not expected to win games, just sort of. So there's pros and cons on both sides. And at the end of the day, Jeff Gorton and Kent Hughes will decide what they think is the best for Joshua Waugh's development. So it's almost like flip a coin at this point.
Yeah, I think Joshua Waugh deserves to be in the NHL right now. I think he is one of the 12 best forwards in the Canadiens organization. But you also have to consider the Laval Rocket are on the edge of a playoff run. Would it be more beneficial for Joshua Waugh to continue playing those games and have a playoff run with the Laval Rocket instead of playing out the rest of the season with the Canadiens? I would assume that they'll at least paper him down on the last eligible day to go down to Laval so that he can play there for the playoffs. But if Laval starts losing a bit, I would assume that he'll be sent down as well, just to give them a bit of a bump. There's a lot of good prospects in Laval already. A lot of good players who maybe deserve a shot to be looked at, but unfortunately a lot of them are defensemen. So Logan Mailloux, right? You look at what he's doing right now. He's been absolutely on fire since the All-Star break. He's actually even before that, kind of doing the same thing that Nick Suzuki is doing up here. And he probably deserves a couple of games in the NHL with the way that he's playing. He might not get it. You got Lane Hudson, who they want to sign at the end of the year. Joshua Waugh, same thing. He may deserve to play up here. He may not get to spend the rest of the season with the Montreal Canadiens, even if he deserves it. I think it is more important to get a taste of playoff action than it is to play in the NHL the rest of the way here. But I really like what I've seen from this player. I think he's a very smart player, deceptive, and willing to put shots on net, which is always a good thing.
Well, if Caden Gooley had been hurt badly in that game Sunday, and it looked like he had been hurt badly when he first got injured with his arm, speaking with him the next day, he said it was just a stinger. Before the Ducks game, he said it was just a stinger, like what football players got. He said it hurt like hell, he said, when it happened, but it went away. If he had been injured, I think maybe we probably would have seen Logan Mailloux, because they'd need to call up a defenseman with Jordan Harris also out, and who else is there down there to call up?
Speaking of defensemen, Jaden Struble, he's looked really good since being called up by the Canadiens, but then that game on Sunday against St. Louis, he struggled. Is there any reason to be concerned with this player? I know, Stu, you've been a huge fan of his. Do you think we should be concerned, or is it just another bump in the road for a young player developing?
No, when he got called up, Kent Hughes told him, even when things were going well, like, you're going to have some bad games are going to come. Be ready for it. It's part of young defense, part of any defenseman. I mean, Rick, guys have bad games, and it took him a long time into his rookie season to have a bad game, and he was bad against St. Louis, and kudos to him. Like after the game, he came out, he faced the media, and he said it was his worst game. I know somebody who saw him after the game and said it looked like his dog had died or something. He was so upset with the way he had played, but he bounced back, played well against Anaheim. He's a confident kid, and confidence is, you hear players, it's so important for any pro athlete. And his confidence, while it maybe took a little bit of a blow in that game, it bounced right back. And we saw, the way he played against St. Louis. And he's so good at those. He's good at a lot of things, but he's really good at those little short passes sort of to empty open space where his forwards can come in and pick it up. And he's such a smart hockey player, and he's really impressed me. And I think the ability, and he doesn't panic. Like when he makes a mistake, you'll see some young defensemen panic and they sort of don't know what to do and they start running around. He doesn't do that. He had one bad game, and he was due to have a bad game. And the way he rebounded from it, I'm sure the coaching staff is probably thinking maybe it's a good thing he had that bad game, because now they see that he can bounce back from it and he can recover pretty quickly.
Yeah, and at 22 years old, he's shown from when he first arrived that he's able to play. Let's not get too carried away with a game that maybe he wasn't at his best, because that's normal. He's a quality kid. He does a lot of things really well. Moving the puck intelligently, one-on-one battles, all those key ingredients that make a real good defenseman, and a good character kid that will respond to a bad game in taking that as part of his growing, and will try not to make the same mistake twice. And great to have a kid like that, tough, big, strong, and is a real asset on the blue line, that his future looks really bright.
Yeah, Struble, the thing that stands out to me the most is he's utterly confident in his skills, but not overconfident. Like, he knows exactly what he can do, and he executes it extremely well. I do think he's been struggling a bit more since he got more responsibility, but I also think that's completely natural for a young player. Around, I think it was December 30th, he got moved from the third pair to the second pair. And since then, he's been getting way more minutes every night, especially at even strength, way more responsibility. And it's a much tougher job to play second pair minutes as opposed to third pair. So they're going to be bumps in the road. But exactly, right? And I think that extra opportunity, that extra challenge is good for him. And it was nice to see him have a really good game after maybe his worst game. I think he's had struggle games, but not very many bad games, which there's kind of like a difference between those two, where for a bad game, to me, it's like a player is making it harder on themselves versus having a hard time. And he just hasn't done that a lot. He doesn't make things harder for himself or his teammates. So I really like Jayden Struble. I think he's really solidified himself as a strong NHL player at a very young age, when I think a lot of people, myself included, did not expect him to make the NHL this year at all.
No, he's the biggest surprise, I think, this season. Nobody, including him, even when he got called up, Kent Hughes told him, "You're not going to play. We're just calling you up because we need to have an extra defenseman on this road trip." And then Jordan Harris got hurt, and as they say, the rest is history. He's made the most of his opportunity. And like before the season, nobody was talking about Jayden Struble playing with the Canadiens this season, right? He was going to play in Laval, and we'll see what happens in the future. Maybe next year, maybe a couple of years. He got his spot, and he's not going to let it go.
Yeah, and in fairness to him, too, that game against St. Louis, losing 7-2, he wasn't the only player that had a really bad game there. Yeah. But I also want to get your thoughts on Jake Evans and your assessment of his play so far this season. Andrew, what have you thought about it?
I think Jake Evans has been admirable in roles that he is not fit for. I think he is probably the guy on the team who tries the absolute hardest, aside from maybe Brendan Gallagher. But the talent level in terms of putting the puck in the net just isn't there. I don't think that you can expect him long-term to be a second or third line center even. He doesn't have the scoring ability. But I do love the player, honestly. He just never... He's the most honest effort guy that you can imagine, right? He's going to do everything it takes, everything he can do to help his team win. I think if he had the same level of talent with the puck as he does defending the point on the penalty kill, he'd score 25 goals a season. Like he's just an aggressive, likable player, and he's a good defensive player. Offensively, not as good. He's a limited player. I think he's a good fourth line center, but other than that, he's just kind of put in a role that's not fit for him.
Yeah. Coaches say, Michel Therrien used to say it a lot, and Marty St. Louis says it sometimes also. There's different chairs for different players. They got to fit into that chair, and Jake Evans' chair is a fourth-line center. He's a fourth-line center. Can win face-offs, solid defensively, kills penalties, but the offense is just not there. 3 goals this season. The goal against Anaheim was his first in 25 games. And it was a beautiful goal. Like, it seems the goals he scores are all beautiful goals. And then you wonder,
they are.
Why can't he do that more often? Like, they're all like highlight reel goals, but he scores like 4 a year. And it's really bizarre because he has offensive skill when you see him score like that, but it happens like 3 or 4 times a year, and all 3 or 4 goals are like highlight reel. It's bizarre in a way.
Yeah, I mean, he fits the role of the fourth line center, hardworking guy. Has improved in his faceoffs. Nothing that makes you go wow offensively, obviously, with 3 goals, but a quality kid that comes to play every night and gives it all. And you, like I said, you need guys like that fill that position, and you know what you're going to get out of them. It would be nice to see him chip in a few more goals here and there, but it's not, I don't think, his forte. But he does bring consistency and effort and desire to make the difference when he is on the ice. And again, a type of player that they like to have in their lineup that really cares.
Well, having a fourth line center who scores 6 or 7 goals a year and kills penalties and wins faceoffs that's okay. That's okay. You like him more, but that's okay. The problem is when Anderson isn't scoring and Gallagher isn't scoring and Armia isn't scoring and nobody's scoring except for the top line. That it highlights Jake Evans' lack of offense even more. But if you had 3 lines that could score and you have Jake Evans doing what he does and scoring his 5-6 goals and everything else, it's fine. But this team isn't at that point yet. So it makes his lack of offense look even worse. And as you said, Andrew, he's being put up and playing in the third line, second line, even at times, depending on injuries. And he's not talented enough to play in those roles.
Well, that's it for us this week. Thank you for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the Hockey Inside Out YouTube channel and sign up for the newsletters. Go to montrealgazette.com/newsletters and click on the Hockey Inside Out one. And of course, check out Hockey Inside Out to get all your daily Habs coverage. And if you have a question for the panel, make sure to leave it in the comments section below. We will see you here next week.